Alright, Trekkies and Trekkers, time for the final episode review of the day, which is Shadowplay. Excuse me. When Dax and Odo investigate the particle field on a nearby planet, Dax detects Omicron particles isolated in a small valley. These particles are very rare, and they appear to be interfering with other scans, so the pair beams down to the planet. Once on the planet, they find a small village, and with their limited tricorder functions, determine the source to be some sort of reactor at the center of the village. Odo suggests they leave, but Dax insists on scanning it in more detail. They discover by Protector Coilist, who was brandishing a weapon. Meanwhile, on Deep Space Nine, Major Kieran Reese keeps her eye on Quark, and stops his cousin Kono from smuggling stolen merchandise from a museum on Cardassia 5 onto the station. Commander Sisko also talks to his son Jake about getting a job. Eventually talks Jake into becoming Chief Miles O'Brien's apprentice, saying will it grant his entrance request to Starfleet Academy. However, Jake seems to do it because he has to rather than because he wants to. Back on the planet, Coilus interrogates Dax and Odo. They both insist they have committed no crime and had just arrived. Odo demonstrates her innocence by temporarily beaming himself back to the runabout, saying if they wanted to escape capture, they would have already. They convince the Protector they did nothing, leaving Coilus disappointed. The Starfleet officers had been his last possible suspects in 22 unsolved disappearances occurring over a period of months. Odo offers his assistance as an investigator. The first person Dax and Odo talked to is Rurigan, the elder of the village. He confirms that his daughter was the latest victim to disappear. After Dax scans for EM traces and detects nothing, Odo talks to Taya, Rurigan's granddaughter. She shies away from Odo and will talk to him because she believes her mother will eventually come back. Rurigan says the questions from Odo can wait until morning. On the station, Commander Sisko sends Jake off on his first day on the job with O'Brien, giving him a comm badge. Meanwhile, Major Kira talks to Dr. Julian Bashir about spying on Quark. She wants to make sure Quark isn't up to something while Odo is away. Bashir is happy to do it, since Garrick has been teaching him surveillance techniques. Just then, Kira is informed by Sisko that a Vedic Borelli ship has just docked for an unannounced visit to the station. Continuing his investigation the following day, Odo tries to talk to Taya again. She still seems uncomfortable discussing the subject of her mother's disappearance, asking instead what happened to Odo's face. He explains that he is a shapeshifter, which he mainly understands by the term changeling. Taya maintains that changelings are make-believe, but speaks wistfully about being one. When Taya concludes that everyone would want to be her friend if she were a changeling, Odo assures her that it is not easy. With uncharacteristic detail, Odo shares his experiences from his early years after he was discovered, when people befriended him just so they could see him change into various items. Revealing the beginnings of a friendship, Taya offers that while others may have been afraid of him, she is not afraid. Inquiring about Odo's parents, Taya then brings up her parents. She reveals that her father died when she was 4, and that the last time she saw her mother, she was in her workroom making a pot for the village's baker, Mr. Depnan. When she went to get her for the midday meal, Taya continues her mother had vanished. Probing further, Odo asks how her mother was acting, or whether she had been on a trip or vacation. Taya replies with confusion that no one has ever left the valley. Odo seems intrigued, and when Taya morosely asks if her mother is ever coming back, Odo assures her warmly, I promise you, I will do everything I can to find her and bring her back to you. Back on the station, Jake is having trouble identifying isolinear rods with Odo at a table in the Replomat. When he continues to be baffled, the chief reassures him that he didn't even get this stuff until after his academy training, drawing aside from Jake. Jake explains that he doesn't want to go to Starfleet Academy, but that he can't tell his dad. Understanding Jake's quandary, O'Brien shares how he had almost become a cello player as his father wanted. His father went so far as to send a recorded audition to the Aldebaran Music Academy. 2 days before he was sent to Parver Music School, O'Brien enlisted in Starfleet. However, as O'Brien explains, his father eventually came around, and is even proud to introduce him as my son, Senior Chief Specialist Miles Edward O'Brien. If Jake's father is anything like his was, O'Brien explains, he will understand. Also in the station, Brayley and Kira exit the shrine, argue about the merits of the Vedek's speech. After some playful banter, they discover mutual enjoyment of spring ball and leave to engage in a match using the holoprogram Kira had O'Brien create for her. Back in the Yadiran settlement, the investigation continues. Odo interrogates Rurigan, asking him why he seems unconcerned despite his daughter being among the missing. The old man responds that there is nothing he can do about it. Odo points out the pain in his eyes. Rurigan states he is dying, but he has had a good life and only wishes he could have seen his daughter one more time. Odo presses Rurigan, asking him specifically why no one leaves the village, not even to look for the missing villagers. Rurigan only insists cryptically that he is certain that there are no missing people out there. Later, Daxo and Taya climb a hillside outside the village, with the little girl telling them a story about a foolish changeling. Odo engages the child in the story with friendly banter. As they continue to get further from the village, Taya shows them a tree where she and her friends go out and play sometimes. Odo tells her to wait there while he takes Dax further out. As she continues walking, the scanner vanishes in her hand. When Taya starts moving towards them, Odo tells her to stop, but she tries to hand some berries to him, and then her arm disappears. It reappears when she pulls it back to her. Now the nature of the village is clearer to Dax and Odo. They return to the center of the city and bring Cloyus to the reactor. Dax explains she knows what happened to the people. After being able to use the console to make his cloak disappear and then reappear, she explains the situation. It's not a reactor, it's a holo generator. It creates an Omicron field and manipulates it to create matter. Everything in this village, his cloak and the people are made up of these particles. The component that controls the field is breaking down, and people are subsequently being lost. Corliss can't believe it. Sure he's not a holographic projection. Odo was happened to Taya's arm. Corliss insists he needs more proof before he believes he and his loved ones are holograms. To prove it, Odo and Dex agree to take anyone interested to the edge of the valley. Back on the station, Vedek, Braille, and Kira enjoyed dinner after the spring ball match, during which Kira was victorious. The conversation turns intimate as they begin to acknowledge their attraction to one another. Soon they are kissing when Braille mentions in passing about how Pilar Ritt, the man who invited him to the station, had a sizable gambling debt to Quark. She suddenly bolts for the door, leaving Braille confused. Kira, however, is convinced she knows the real reason why Borelli was invited here. On the planet, the villagers are gathered together after seeing the vanishing effects of the edge of the field. Back in the village square, many believe it is a trick. Corliss says it's because they were programmed not to want to leave. He says the only alternative to having everyone disappear one at a time is let Dax turn off the machine and fix it. However, if she can't, the whole village will soon cease to exist. After some murmuring, at the suggestion of Rurigan, they agree to let Dax shut it off. Once it is disabled, the people, the buildings, everything disappears. Everything except Rurigan, who appears to have expected this. He explains he lived on the Adira Prime, with all of the people there, but after the planet was conquered by the Dominion, it changed their whole way of life and he decided to leave. He came here and set up this holo generator, recreating the village with all his friends. He has been living among these people for 30 years, sometimes even forgetting they were holograms. He wants to take them back to Yadira Prime. Odo wants to know what will happen to the people in the village. While it may not be real the way biological life forms are real, perhaps they are worth keeping alive, since they appear to think, feel, and reproduce. Rurigan is also betrayed by his emotions. They are real to him, since he didn't want his granddaughter to get hurt, and he cares about them. After such a rousing speech by Odo, bringing him to tears since he does love his granddaughter, he agrees not to turn his back on them. Back on the station, Jake finally insists that amidst his father he doesn't want to go to Starfleet. He wants to do something that is like he is, not like his father is. Benjamin understands and simply asks Jake to find something he loves to do and do it the best he can. Kira confronts Quark with his cousin Kono in custody, and while he refuses to admit trying to distract her by suggesting Borelli be invited to the station, it is clear she is correct. Dax fixes the machine, and Rurigan makes one last request. Don't tell the holograms he isn't one. After agreeing, she turns it back on, and everything is restored, including the missing people. Corliss wonders who created all this, but Odo simply says that whoever they were, they did a fine job. Tai says goodbye, and Odo turns into a spinning top to amuse her, just before he and Dax beam up. Aw, that's nice. So anyway, let's look at the background information of this episode, beginning with story and script. This episode was originally to be titled Persistence of Vision, a title later used in the second season of Star Trek Voyager. Writer Robert Hewitt Wolf's original idea involved Dax and O'Brien trapped on an alien planet. They escape from the prison, but as they attempt to leave the planet, they discover they are in fact still in the prison. They escape again, this time make it back to Deep Space Nine, but neither of them are entirely convinced that they are in fact free, and probably never will be. Elements of the alien virtual reality prison concept will make it into the third season episode The Search Part 2, the fourth season episode Hard Time, and the third season episode of Star Trek Voyager, Displaced. A similar plot appeared in an 8th season episode of Red Dwarf, where the main characters are imprisoned in a virtual reality simulation of the ship to observe their escape attempt. The concept also bears some striking similarities to Ship in a Bottle and Frame of Mind. Michael Piller commented, quote, "When we put Odo there, we realized that we could deal with an idea of another life form, and he could stand for the values and survival of this community strictly out of his personal value system. Excuse me. We knew the way to do that was to connect him with somebody on the planet. The relationship between Odo and the girl worked remarkably well." In a scene cut from the aired episode, it was mentioned that there was an incident on Brenda 5 where half the population of a village disappeared, and that it was later found out that they had been abducted by Orions to work as slaves in their mining camps. And now on to the production of this episode. Kenneth Tobey, who played Rurigan in this episode, is one of Ira Steven Bear's all-time favorite actors. Bear commented, quote, "I love Ken. He's a sweet, sweet, sweet man. I've always liked his work, and I've always wanted to use him. It was great to have him in a Star Trek, and a science fiction thing." Jen Curry was also excited that Toby was cast in the episode. Curry commented, quote, "It was a wonderful thing for us, because we're all science fiction fans, and he was in the great ones, like The Thing, and It Came from Beneath the Sea." The set for the colony was a modified version of that scene in Thine Own Self. And now finally onto some trivia surrounding this episode. This episode features a twist on the typical 2-storyline episode plot. In this episode there are 3. The main storyline features Dax and Odo on the planet. The second storyline surrounds Kira and Borelli's romance. The third storyline deals with Jake hesitance regarding joining Starfleet Academy. The blooming sexual tension between Kira and Borelli finally shows itself in this episode, as the couple share their first kiss. It was later revealed that Quark purposely urged his debtor to invite Borelli to distract Kira from interfering with his affairs with the absence of Odo. This episode marks the third and final reference to the Dominion before they are finally encountered in the second season finale, the Jem'Hadar. The Dominion had previously been mentioned in Rules of Acquisition and Sanctuary. O'Brien says his father introduces him as Senior Chief Specialist Miles Edward O'Brien. In the U.S. Navy, Senior Chief Petty Officer is an enlisted rank. In Star Trek, it is the first reference to O'Brien's full rank. This changes, however, in Hippocratic Oath, when the Jem'Hadar First Goran Agar identifies O'Brien as a Chief Petty Officer, which is one step down from a Senior Chief. However, this can be attributed to O'Brien's father deliberately exaggerating, or the U.S. Navy practice full grades of Chief Petty Officer being considered part of the Chief Petty Officer community. In this episode, O'Brien mentions having decided to be a musician before joining Starfleet. This refers to his cello playing in the Next Generation episode, The Instance of Command. This episode marks the first reference to Bajoran's sport of spring ball in the series. This episode establishes that Major Kira had 2 brothers. Later were briefly as young children in the first 2346 sequence of Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night, which gives their names as Kira Paul and Kira Rion. According to the non-canon novelist Soul Key, they have both died by 2375. This is the only episode of the series that was directed by Robert Schreier, who had directed TNG episodes like Measure of a Man and The Defector. Noe Thornton, who played Ty in this episode, had previously appeared as Clara Sutter in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Imaginary Friend. So So overall, I think this is a pretty good episode, and I did like the budding friendship between Odo and the young girl. So yeah. So overall, I give the episode Shadowplay 4 warp cores out of 5. Well, tune in next time as we take a look at the next episode, Playing God. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.